The sweet smell of cinnamon and butter still hung in my kitchen, when my own son looked me dead in the eye and said the words that would shatter everything. "Dad, you won't need this house much longer anyway." What he didn't know was that I'd already heard his phone calls to that real estate agent. What he didn't know was that I was about to teach him the most expensive lesson of his life. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments section what time it is where you're watching this. Let me take you back to where this all started. 3 days before Thanksgiving 2023, in my little colonial on Maple Street in Springfield, Massachusetts. I was standing in my kitchen, breathing in that familiar scent of Sarah's apple pie recipe. Funny how smells can transport you through time. One whiff of those Granny Smith apples bubbling with brown sugar and cinnamon, and I was right back to 1987, watching my wife Sarah roll out pie crust on this same marble countertop, flour dust in her dark hair. The morning light filtered through the sheer curtains she'd hung 23 years ago, the ones with tiny yellow roses that she'd found at that little shop downtown. Even now, I could hear her humming while she worked, the soft melody of Moon River floating through the house like a gentle ghost. This kitchen had been the heart of our home for 37 years. The scratch marks on the hardwood floor where Michael had dragged his high chair, the pencil marks on the door frame measuring his height every birthday, from age 3 when he barely reached my knee, to 18 when he finally matched my 6-foot frame. Sarah had refused to let me paint over those marks, even when the realtor suggested it might help with resale value. "We're never selling," she'd said firmly, her green eyes flashing with that stubborn streak I'd fallen in love with. "This house holds our whole life, Jackson." She was right. Every room told a story. The living room where we'd held Michael through countless nights of fever and bad dreams. The dining room where we'd celebrated his soccer victories and consoled him through his first heartbreak. The master bedroom where we'd whispered our fears about his deployment to Afghanistan and where we cried with relief when he came home safe. The house even remembered Sarah's last Christmas, the way she'd insisted on making her famous apple pie, despite the chemotherapy making her hands shake. I'd found her at this very counter at 4 a.m., tears streaming down her face as she struggled to peel apples with trembling fingers. "Let me help you," I'd whispered, wrapping my arms around her from behind. "I need to do this, Jackson. I need our traditions to continue, even when I can't." Now, 2 years after losing her, I still made that pie every Thanksgiving, still used her handwritten recipe card, stained with decades of vanilla extract and memories, still set her place at the table, because, somehow, it made the house feel less empty. The afternoon sun was casting long shadows across the oak dining table when I heard Michael's car pull into the driveway, the same table where he'd done homework for 12 years, where Sarah had taught him to play chess, where we'd had the conversation about his mother's diagnosis, his strong hands gripping mine as we both pretended we weren't terrified. I pulled the pie from the oven, golden and perfect, just like Sarah would have made it. I had no idea it would be the last normal moment in this house for a very long time. Michael walked through that front door like he owned the place, and maybe in his mind, he already did. "Smells good in here, Dad," he said, but his voice had that distracted quality I'd been hearing more and more lately. The kind of tone you use when you're saying the right words, but your mind is somewhere else entirely. I watched him take in the kitchen, his childhood kitchen, and for a split second, I saw something flicker across his face. Recognition? Nostalgia? But then it was gone, replaced by that calculating look I'd been seeing ever since he'd gotten engaged to Jennifer, that real estate agent with the perfectly straight teeth and the way of making every conversation sound like a business transaction. "Come sit down," I said, gesturing toward the dining room. "I just pulled the pie out, your mom's recipe." He followed me to the oak table, the same table where I'd helped him with algebra homework when he was 14, where Sarah had bandaged his skinned knees when he was 7, where we'd celebrated when he'd gotten his acceptance letter to UMass. But as he sat down, he didn't see any of that history. He saw square footage, market value, dollar signs. "Dad, we need to talk," and my stomach dropped. Those 5 words, they never lead anywhere good. "What's on your mind, son?" Michael reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone, sliding it across the table like he was dealing cards. The screen showed a Zillow listing, my house, with an estimated value that made my breath catch. $387,000. "Look, Dad, I've been thinking about your situation here." My situation, like I was some kind of problem to be solved. "What situation is that, Michael?" His fingers drummed against the table, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood. But there was nothing childlike about the words that came next. "You're 72 years old. You're rattling around in a 4-bedroom house by yourself. The property taxes alone are eating you alive. What, $8,000 a year? The heating bills in winter? Dad, you're house poor and you don't even realize it." I stared at my son, this man I'd raised, this boy I'd taught to ride a bike in the driveway outside. "I manage just fine, Michael." "Do ya?" He leaned forward, and his voice took on that patronizing tone that made my teeth clench. "Jennifer ran the numbers. You're sitting on nearly $400,000 here. Think about what you could do with that money." Jennifer, of course. The woman who'd never set foot in this house until 6 months ago, who'd walk through these rooms like she was conducting an inspection, who'd suggested we update the kitchen because the appliances were so dated. "I could put you in a really nice assisted living place," Michael continued, warming to his theme. "Something closer to us in Boston. You'd have people to talk to, activities, meals prepared, no more worrying about maintenance or yard work or—" "I don't want to be closer to you in Boston," I said quietly. "I want to be here, in my home." The word home seemed to bounce off him like rain off a windshield. "Dad, be realistic. You're not getting any older. This place is too much for you. And honestly," he paused, and I saw something cold creep into his eyes, something that reminded me of his mother's cancer, the way it had slowly, methodically destroyed everything beautiful about her. "You won't need it much longer anyway." The words hit me like a physical blow. I sat there, staring at this stranger wearing my son's face, feeling something fundamental shift between us. The casual cruelty of it, the cold calculation, the way he just dismissed my mortality like it was a line item in a budget. I thought about all the nights I'd stayed up with him when he had pneumonia at age 6, the college tuition I'd paid by working double shifts at the factory, the down payment I helped him make on his first apartment, the way that Sarah and I scraped together money for his wedding even though we couldn't really afford it. All of it reduced to, "You won't need it much longer anyway." I couldn't speak, couldn't move, could barely breathe. Michael seemed to take my silence as consideration. "Just think about it, Dad. We'll talk more soon." He stood up, straightened his tie, and walked toward the door, leaving his father sitting in stunned silence at the table where his mother used to serve birthday cake. After Michael left, I sat alone at that oak table, his words echoing in the silence. "You won't need it much longer anyway." But Sarah's voice was louder. I closed my eyes, and I was back there. March 15th, 2021. The day Dr. Patterson delivered the news that would change everything. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 6 months, maybe 8 if we were lucky. Sarah had gripped my hand so tight I thought she might break my fingers. But when she spoke, her voice was steady as steel. "Jackson, Promise me something. Anything, sweetheart, anything. Promise me you won't sell this house. Not ever. I remember thinking it was an odd thing to worry about when we were staring down death itself. But Sarah was always 3 steps ahead of everyone else. "This house is our life," she whispered, her green eyes bright with unshed tears. "Every room, every corner, every creaky floorboard, it's all we built together. If you sell it, you're selling us." Those were her exact words. I'd replayed them 1,000 times since her funeral. The next 6 months became a blur of hospital visits and sleepless nights, Sarah fighting with everything she had, me holding her hair while the chemo ravaged her body, both of us pretending we weren't terrified. But even then, even when the pain medication made her drift in and out of consciousness, she'd still talk about the house. "Remember when Michael took his first steps, right there by the fireplace?" she'd whisper, pointing toward the living room with a trembling finger. "Remember the Christmas morning when he was 8 and couldn't sleep, so we all came down at 4 a.m. to open presents?" Her final day, she'd insisted I wheel her chair through every room. The master bedroom where we'd made love for 27 years. The guest room that had been Michael's nursery. Then his childhood bedroom. Then the room he'd come home to after his deployment. The kitchen where she'd taught him to make pancakes and where he'd later told us about his first girlfriend. In each room, she'd touch something. A door frame, a windowsill, the banister on the stairs. She'd say, "I'm leaving pieces of myself everywhere. This house will remember me even when you think you're forgetting." Her last words weren't "I love you," though I knew she did. They were, "Take care of our home, Jackson. Keep our memories safe." 2 years later, I could still feel her presence everywhere. The way the afternoon light hit the kitchen counter, exactly the way it did when she'd bake. The sound of the old furnace kicking on that always made her laugh because it reminded her of her father's snoring. The garden she'd planted by the back porch, where her roses still bloomed every spring like clockwork. Michael didn't understand. To him, this was just real estate, square footage and market comparisons and property taxes. But to me, selling this house would be like cremating Sarah all over again. Every dish in the cabinets, she chosen. Every paint color on these walls, she picked. Every family photo hanging in the hallway told the story of the life we'd built together, brick by brick, memory by memory. This wasn't just my house. It was her shrine, her legacy, her final gift to me. And my own son wanted me to sell it for convenience. "Over my dead body," I whispered to the empty dining room. But I had no idea how close to prophecy those words would turn out to be. The pressure campaign started subtle, almost friendly. 3 days after our kitchen confrontation, Michael called during my evening news. "Hey, Dad, just checking in on you. Everything okay over there?" But his concern felt manufactured, like he was reading from a script Jennifer had written. "I'm fine, Michael." "Good, good. Listen, I was talking to Jennifer about our conversation the other day, and she had some really interesting insights about your property taxes. Did you know that Massachusetts has a senior citizen property tax exemption? You could be saving thousands." Jennifer. Always Jennifer. "I'll look into it," I lied. "Great. Also, she mentioned this gorgeous assisted living community in Lexington. They have a golf course, Dad. Remember how you used to love golf with Mom?" The memory stung. Sarah cheering from the cart while I shanked shots into the rough at Riverside Country Club. Our Sunday tradition for 15 years, until arthritis made it too painful to swing. "I don't play anymore, son." Well, maybe you could start again. Fresh environment, new opportunities. Think about it. But I could hear Jennifer's voice underneath his words, like a ventriloquist working a puppet. The visits started coming weekly after that, always unannounced, always with that same fake concern. Jennifer would sweep through my kitchen, making little disapproving noises. "Jackson, this refrigerator is so old. When did you last replace the water filter?" She'd open cabinets like she was conducting inventory. "These dishes are chipped. You really should treat yourself to a new set." Everything in my house became evidence of my supposed decline. Michael would chime in with observations that felt like tiny needles. "Dad, you missed a spot shaving this morning." Or, "Have you been forgetting to bring in the mail? I noticed it was piling up." I hadn't missed a spot. The mail had been late due to a new postal carrier. But suddenly everything I did was being scrutinized, cataloged, used against me. The manipulation got bolder. "Dad, I hate to bring this up," Michael said one December afternoon, "but I noticed you've been buying a lot of groceries lately. Are you sure you're not overestimating what you need? Jennifer thinks maybe meal planning isn't your strong suit anymore." I'd been buying extra food for the church food drive, something Sarah and I had done every Christmas for 20 years. But explaining that would sound defensive, so I stayed quiet. That silence became their weapon. "See?" Jennifer whispered to Michael, loud enough for me to hear. "He's losing track of things." During their Christmas visit, I caught Jennifer in Sarah's craft room taking photos with her phone. "Just documenting the space," she said when I confronted her, "for insurance purposes. You should really have an updated inventory of your belongings." But I knew better. She was calculating square footage, planning renovations, mentally redecorating rooms that still held my wife's presence. I started finding real estate flyers in my mailbox, properties in senior communities, assisted living brochures, pamphlets about right-sizing your lifestyle, all addressed to me, but clearly Jennifer's handiwork. The breaking point came in early January. I was shoveling my driveway after a snowstorm when Michael pulled up, window rolled down. "Dad, you shouldn't be doing that at your age. What if you have a heart attack? What if you fall and break a hip?" "I've been shoveling this driveway for 37 years, Michael." "And that's exactly the problem," he snapped, his mask finally slipping. "You're acting like you're still 40 when you're not." Jennifer pulled the property records. "Do you know how much this place is costing you in maintenance? The new roof you put on last year, the furnace repairs. Dad, you're hemorrhaging money on a house that's too big for one person." There it was. The real Michael. Not concerned son, but frustrated heir watching his inheritance dissolve in home repairs. "This conversation is over," I said, turning back to my shovel. But as I watched him drive away, I realized something chilling. This wasn't about my welfare anymore. This was about their timeline. And I was running out of time to figure out their real plan. By February, I started timing Michael's visits. 23 minutes. That's how long his last visit lasted. 23 minutes, and 19 of them were spent walking through the house, opening closets, peering into rooms, asking questions about maintenance schedules and utility costs. 4 minutes for his actual father. "How's work, son?" I'd ask, desperate for normal conversation. "Fine," he'd answered, distracted, running his finger along the windowsill in the living room, checking for dust. "Dad, when's the last time you had these windows professionally cleaned? The seals look compromised." Compromised. Like everything else in my life, apparently. The worst part was watching him ignore Sarah's things. He'd walk right past the photos of us on our anniversary trips, step around her favorite reading chair without a glance, completely avoid the corner where her piano still sat with sheet music exactly as she'd left it. but he'd stop and examine every potential problem: a loose floorboard, a paint chip, a water stain on the ceiling from last winter's ice dam. He wasn't visiting his father anymore. He was inspecting his investment. The neighbors started noticing. Eleanor Patterson from next door cornered me at the mailbox one gray afternoon. We'd been neighbors for 15 years, shared countless conversations over the fence about gardens and grandchildren. "Eleanor, honey," she said, her voice careful, concerned, "is everything all right? I couldn't help but overhear some raised voices the other day." My stomach clenched. "What did you hear, Eleanor?" "Well, I was watering my petunias, and I heard your son saying something about stubborn old man and financial responsibility. Then that woman with him, his girlfriend, she was talking about property values and market timing. Jennifer. Of course, she was loud enough for the neighbors to hear. I'm fine, Eleanor, just family discussions." But her worried expression told me she didn't buy it, and worse, I realized half the block probably knew my business now. At the grocery store, Mrs. Chen from the church gave me a pitying look and said, "Jackson, dear, are you managing okay on your own? My daughter mentioned assisted living facilities have wonderful programs now." At the bank, the teller, who'd known me for 20 years, suddenly seemed overly helpful, speaking slowly and clearly like I might not understand basic transactions. Even Father Rodriguez, after Sunday Mass, pulled me aside. "Jackson, if you ever need someone to talk to about family matters, my door is always open." The whispers were spreading. Somehow, some way, word was getting out that poor old Jackson Miller couldn't handle his own life anymore, that his son was concerned about his situation. I started staying home more, avoiding those pitying glances and careful questions. The isolation felt safer than the alternative, having to explain that my own son was orchestrating a campaign to make me look incompetent. But staying home meant more time alone with my thoughts, more time to replay every conversation, every subtle insult, every calculated move in Michael and Jennifer's chess game. And slowly, terrifyingly, I began to understand their strategy. They weren't just trying to convince me to sell. They were trying to convince everyone else that I was no longer capable of making that decision myself.
March 12th, a date I'll never forget because it was the day my son stopped pretending to care about me and showed me exactly who he'd become. The doorbell rang at 3:47 p.m. I remember because I was watching my afternoon news, the same routine I'd had for decades. But when I opened the door, Michael wasn't alone. Jennifer stood beside him, clutching a leather briefcase like it contained nuclear launch codes. Both of them wore expressions I'd never seen before: cold, determined, businesslike. "Dad, we need to talk," Michael said, brushing past me into the living room. "This can't wait any longer." Jennifer set her briefcase on Sarah's coffee table, the antique oak piece we'd bought for our 10th anniversary, and clicked it open with surgical precision. Inside were manila folders, legal documents, and a stack of papers thick enough to choke a horse. "Jackson," Jennifer began, her voice taking on that patronizing tone reserved for children and the elderly. "We've been doing some research, and we think we found the perfect solution for everyone." She pulled out a document and placed it in front of me. At the top, in bold letters, "Quit-claim deed." "What is this?" I asked, though my stomach already knew. "It's simple," Michael said, settling into my recliner, Sarah's favorite spot to read her mystery novels. "You sign this and the house transfers to me. Clean, easy, no legal fees, no complications." I stared at the paper like it was a rattlesnake. "You want me to just give you my house?" "Dad, look at it rationally," Jennifer interrupted, spreading more papers across the table. "These are the projected maintenance costs for the next 5 years. New roof, HVAC system, plumbing updates. You're looking at nearly $60,000 in repairs. She had charts, actual color-coded charts, showing how my home was apparently a financial disaster waiting to happen. With this arrangement, Michael continued, settling into my recliner, Sarah's favorite spot to read her mystery novels. You get to stay here as long as you want. Nothing changes day to day. But the legal ownership transfers to me, which means I can handle all the maintenance, all the taxes, all the headaches. And when I die? I asked quietly. They exchanged a glance. Quick, but I caught it. Well, Jennifer said carefully, then the estate planning is already handled. No probate, no complications for Michael during his grieving process. Grieving process, like they had already planned my funeral. I won't sign this, I said, pushing the papers back across the table. Michael's face hardened. Dad, be reasonable. We're trying to help you here. Help me or help yourselves to my house? That's not fair, Jennifer snapped, her mask slipping for the first time. We've been patient with your stubbornness, but this is getting ridiculous. You're 72 years old, living alone in a house that's falling apart around you. Everyone can see you're struggling. Everyone? The word hit me like a slap. What everyone? Michael shifted uncomfortably. Dad, people talk. Mrs. Chen mentioned you seemed confused at the grocery store last week. Eleanor Patterson called me because she was worried about you forgetting to bring in your trash cans. The betrayal cut deep. My neighbors, people I'd known for years, reporting back to my son like I was some kind of escaped mental patient. I wasn't confused, I said through gritted teeth. And I had the flu last week, which is why I forgot the trash cans. Look, Jennifer said, leaning forward, this isn't about one incident, it's about a pattern. And legally speaking, if someone were to challenge your mental competency, the threat hung in the air like smoke. Are you threatening me? I stood up, my hands shaking with rage. In my own home? Michael stood too, and for a moment I saw something dangerous flash in his eyes. Dad, nobody's threatening anybody, but you need to understand that Jennifer and I have options here, legal options. This is the easy way, Jennifer added, tapping the quitclaim deed. The way that lets you keep your dignity, stay in your home, maintain your independence. But it's not the only way. I looked at these two people, my son and his fiancée, standing in my living room, surrounded by my memories, threatening me with legal action if I didn't hand over everything Sarah and I had built together. Get out, I whispered. Dad, get out, I roared, louder than I'd raised my voice in years. Take your papers and your threats and get out of my house. They gathered their documents, Jennifer snapping her briefcase shut with obvious irritation. At the door, Michael turned back. We tried to do this the nice way, Dad, but we have other options. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. The door slammed behind them, leaving me alone in the sudden silence. But I wasn't really alone. I could feel Sarah's presence, stronger than ever. And she was furious.
That night, after Michael and Jennifer's legal ambush, I walked through every room of my house. Really walked through it, like Sarah had done on her final day. In the living room, I stood where Michael had just threatened me, but all I could see was Christmas morning, 1995. 6-year-old Michael tearing through wrapping paper, his face glowing in the light of our tree. Sarah on the couch in her red flannel pajamas, laughing so hard at his excitement that she snorted, that adorable snort that always made us both crack up even harder. "Daddy, Daddy, look! Santa brought the Power Rangers!" he'd screamed, launching himself into my arms with such force we'd both tumbled backwards onto the carpet. Sarah had captured it all with her old Polaroid camera, the one that made that satisfying whir click sound. Those photos were still in the album on the bookshelf, but I wondered if Michael even remembered that morning. If he remembered how he'd insisted we all wear our Christmas pajamas for breakfast, or how he'd made Sarah a coffee with his new toy kitchen that was really just water with sugar. In the kitchen, I touched the marble counter where Sarah used to roll out sugar cookies every December. The surface still bore tiny scratches from a rolling pin, marks I'd threatened to sand out for years until she'd stopped me. "Those scratches tell our story, Jackson," she'd said, flower in her dark hair. "Every Christmas, every celebration, they're all here in this counter." Michael used to stand on a wooden step stool right here, his tiny hands trying to help cut out star shapes and Christmas trees. When he was 8, he'd declared he was too old for cookie decorating and stomped off to his room. Sarah had cried quietly that afternoon, mourning the end of another childhood tradition. "He's growing up, honey," I'd told her, wrapping my arms around her from behind. "I know," she'd whispered. "I just wish he could stay little forever." Now I understood what she meant. That little boy with flour on his nose and excitement in his eyes, when exactly had he disappeared? When had he been replaced by this cold stranger with legal papers and calculating eyes? The dining room held the echo of birthday songs, Michael blowing out candles at ages 5, 10, 15, 18. Sarah always making his favorite chocolate cake from scratch, always letting him lick the mixing bowl. His high school graduation party, when 20 teenagers had crowded around this oak table, Sarah serving pizza and joking with Michael's friends like she was one of them. "Your mom's so cool," his buddy Jake had told him that night. "Yeah," he'd grinned, arm draped around Sarah's shoulders. "She's the best." In the master bedroom, I sat on Sarah's side of the bed and remembered the morning Michael had crawled in with us during a thunderstorm. He must have been 4, maybe 5. Sarah had pulled him between us, and he'd fallen asleep to the sound of her humming "You Are My Sunshine." "Promise me you'll always take care of him," she'd whispered over his sleeping head. "Promise me he'll always take care of you," I'd whispered back. Now, surrounded by 37 years of memories, I realized the truth that broke my heart. The son I'd raised, the boy who'd learned to ride bikes in this driveway and brought home finger paintings for our refrigerator, the young man who'd cried in my arms when Sarah died, that Michael was gone. And this stranger wearing his face wanted to steal the last place where my real son still lived.
The phone calls started 3 days after the legal ambush. First one came at 6:30 a.m., jarring me from sleep. Unknown number. When I answered, a polite woman's voice. "Good morning, Mr. Miller. This is Rebecca from Sunrise Senior Living Solutions. I understand you might be interested in exploring some residential options." I hung up, but something cold settled in my stomach. An hour later, another call. "Mr. Miller, this is Advanced Home Care Services. We specialize in helping seniors maintain their independence while addressing safety concerns in the home." I hung up again, but by the third call, this one from a cognitive assessment specialist, I understood what was happening. Someone had put me on a list. Someone was feeding these vultures my information, telling them I was a confused old man who needed their services. Someone named Michael. The mail got worse. Every day brought new envelopes with my name printed in corporate fonts, brochures for memory care facilities, pamphlets about aging in place safely, applications for something called guardianship consultation services, whatever the hell that meant. But it was the letter from Pinnacle Real Estate that made my blood run cold. "Dear Mr. Miller," it read, "we understand you may be considering selling your property at 847 Maple Street. Our preliminary market analysis suggests significant value potential. We'd love to schedule a confidential consultation to discuss your options." Confidential consultation. They'd already driven by, already appraised my house from the outside, already knew exactly what it was worth. I'd never contacted any real estate company, but someone had contacted them for me. The breaking point came when Mrs. Chen knocked on my door, wringing her hands nervously. "Jackson, I hope you don't mind, but your son Michael asked me to keep an eye on you. He seemed very worried." My heart stopped. "What did he ask you to do, exactly?" She looked uncomfortable. "Well, he said to call him if I noticed anything concerning.
if you seemed confused or forgot things, or if there were any safety issues. And have you called him? Her silence was answer enough. Mrs. Chen, what have you reported to my son? Well, last Tuesday you left your porch light on during the day and I thought maybe you'd forgotten. And Sunday I saw you talking to yourself in the garden. I was praying, talking to Sarah at her rose bushes like I did every week, but through Michael's lens, it became evidence of mental decline. He asked me to document everything. He said it was for your own safety. Document everything. Like I was a criminal under surveillance. That evening, I did something I hadn't done since Sarah died. I closed all the curtains and turned off most of the lights. Then I sat in my darkened living room and watched the street. At 8:47 p.m., a white sedan drove slowly past my house. The driver held up a phone, clearly taking photos. 20 minutes later, a different car did the same thing. They were building a case, creating documentation, gathering evidence of an old man who couldn't take care of himself, who lived in a house that was too much for him, who needed intervention from his caring, responsible son. I thought about calling the police, but what would I report? That my neighbors were being asked to spy on me? That real estate agents were interested in my property? That people were taking photos of a house they could see from the public street? Everything Michael was doing was technically legal, probably even looked compassionate from the outside. But I knew better. I'd spent enough time in the factory watching union busters work to recognize a systematic campaign when I saw one. They were going to have me declared incompetent, take guardianship, force me into some sterile facility while they sold my house and split the proceeds. And there was a damn thing I couldn't do to stop them.
The sound that woke me at 2:17 a.m. wasn't thunder. It was the scrape of metal against metal. Someone trying to force my back door. I lay frozen in bed, heart hammering against my ribs, listening to the careful, deliberate sounds of someone trying not to wake me while breaking into my home. Sarah's digital clock cast its green glow across the darkness. 2:18 a.m. Another scrape, a muffled curse, then footsteps on my back porch. 37 years in this house, and I knew every sound it made. The way the third step creaked under weight. The distinctive rattle of the spam door when someone grabbed the handle. These weren't the random noises of raccoons or wind. Someone was trying to get inside. I slipped from bed, bare feet, silent on the hardwood floor Sarah had insisted we install back in '98. Moving like a man half my age, I crept to the bedroom window and peered through the curtain. A white van sat in my driveway. No company markings, no license plate visible from this angle. The same white van I'd seen parked across the street yesterday afternoon. 3 men stood on my back porch, one holding what looked like a crowbar, another with a clipboard, the third recording everything with his phone. Even in the darkness, I could see they wore matching polo shirts, some kind of uniform. Professional movers, or at least people dressed like professional movers. My blood turned to ice as pieces clicked together. The legal threats, the competency documentation, the systematic surveillance. They were going to claim I was having a medical emergency or a mental breakdown, force entry for my own safety. Document the dangerous conditions of an elderly man living alone. Create evidence that I needed immediate intervention. I grabbed my phone and crept downstairs, staying away from windows. In the kitchen, I could hear him more clearly. Doors reinforced, deadbolts solid. Try the basement window. Old houses like this, foundation windows are usually latched. Johnson's waiting in the van. Soon as we're inside, he documents everything. Focus on safety hazards, expired medications, cluttered walkways, anything that looks like neglect. My hands shook as I dialed 911, but then I stopped. What would I tell them?
that my son had sent movers to break into my house at 2 a.m.? It sounded insane. They'd probably conclude the old man was having paranoid delusions. Exactly what Michael wanted. Instead, I did something that surprised even me. I opened the kitchen door and stepped on the back porch. "Gentlemen, can I help you?" The three men froze like deer in headlights. The one with the crowbar, a thick-set guy with arms like tree trunks, recovered first. "Mr. Miller, we're from Sunrise Emergency Moving Services. Your son Michael called us about a family emergency. Said you needed immediate assistance relocating your valuables to a secure storage facility." Sunrise, the same name as the senior living place that had called me. "At 2 in the morning?" The man with the clipboard stepped forward, his voice smooth, practiced. "Sir, we understand this is disorienting. Michael explained you might be confused about the arrangement. He's very concerned about your recent memory issues." Memory issues. There it was. "He said you've been having episodes, forgetting to lock doors, leaving stoves on. Very dangerous for someone your age." They were building their narrative in real time, creating a record of a confused elderly man who didn't understand why help was necessary. "I want you off my property," I said quietly. "Mr. Miller, we're here to help. Michael has legal documentation." I said, "Get off my property." My voice echoed across the neighborhood. Porch lights flickered on. Mrs. Chen's bedroom window glowed yellow. The movers exchanged glances. This wasn't going according to their script. "We'll be back," the thick-set one said, packing up his crowbar, "with proper documentation." I watched them load into their white van and drive away, but I knew this wasn't over. It was just the first probe, testing my defenses, documenting my responses. Standing alone on my back porch at 2:30 a.m., surrounded by the ghosts of better times, I made a decision that would change everything. If Michael wanted to play dirty, I'd show him what 30 years in a union factory had taught me about fighting back. But first, I needed to make some calls, starting with my old friend Tommy Kowalski, who still had connections in places Michael had never dreamed of. The game was about to change, and my son had no idea what was coming.
The morning after the midnight break-in, I did something Michael never expected from his confused old father. I got strategic. First call was to Tommy Kowalski at 7 a.m. sharp. 32 years we'd worked side by side at the Westfield manufacturing plant. Tommy in legal arbitration, me on the floor fighting union busters who thought factory workers were too stupid to understand contracts. "Jackson, Miller, you son of a gun." Tommy's gravelly voice boomed through the phone. "I haven't heard from you since Sarah's funeral. What's going on?" I told him everything. The legal threats, the surveillance, the midnight movers. Tommy listened without interruption, a skill he'd perfected during decades of labor negotiations. "Jesus, Jackson, your kid's running a textbook guardianship scam. I've seen this before with elderly union members. Family gets greedy, starts documenting incompetence, gets a judge to strip legal rights. Can they do it? Not if we're smarter than they are. And brother, I've been outsmarting corporate lawyers since that boy was born." Tommy gave me 3 names: Elena Rodriguez, elder law attorney; Dr. Patricia Walsh, geriatric psychologist who specializes in competency evaluations; and Judge Margaret O'Brien, recently retired, who now works as a private advocate for seniors' rights. "Elaine is the best," Tommy said. "She'll eat your son's real estate girlfriend for lunch." At 9 a.m., I was sitting in Elena Rodriguez's downtown Springfield office, mid-40s, sharp as a blade, with eyes that missed nothing. She reviewed my situation while taking notes on a legal pad. "Mr. Miller, your son is following a playbook. Step 1, establish a pattern of concern. Step 2, document alleged incompetence through third parties. Step 3, file for emergency guardianship citing immediate danger." How close is he? Closer than you think, but here's what he doesn't know.
Massachusetts has some of the strongest senior protection laws in the country, and more importantly, you're not the helpless victim he thinks you are. Elena explained my options with military precision. First, a comprehensive competency evaluation with Dr. Walsh to establish my mental fitness on record. Second, a revocable living trust, transferring the house to an entity I controlled, making guardianship seizure nearly impossible. Third, a restraining order against the moving company based on attempted breaking and entering. But the real weapon, Elena smiled, is Chapter 209A, Massachusetts' elder abuse statute. What your son is doing, the surveillance, intimidation, financial coercion, it's textbook elder abuse. And that carries both criminal and civil penalties. By noon, I had appointments scheduled and paperwork in motion. Dr. Walsh could see me Thursday for a full cognitive assessment. The trust documents would be ready by Friday. Elena was already drafting a cease and desist letter that would make Michael's blood pressure spike. But I wasn't done. At 2 p.m., I walked into Riverside Bank, where I'd done business for 28 years. Carol Henderson, the branch manager, knew me by name. "Mr. Miller, how lovely to see you. How can we help today?" I opened a new account. Not just any account, a special trust fund designed specifically for senior protection with co-signing requirements that made unauthorized access impossible. Then I transferred every penny from my old account plus the contents of my safety deposit box. "Carol," I said as we finished the paperwork, "I want you to flag my old account for suspicious activity monitoring. If anyone tries to access it or claims I'm incompetent, you call Elena Rodriguez immediately." I handed her Elena's card. Carol's eyes widened as she read it. "Elder law attorney. Mr. Miller, are you in some kind of trouble?" "No, Carol, but someone else is about to be." That evening, I sat in my living room with a stack of documents Elena had prepared. Power of attorney revocations, medical directive updates, a comprehensive estate plan that made Michael's inheritance contingent on specific behavioral requirements. The best part? A detailed affidavit documenting every threat, every surveillance incident, every attempted coercion, all signed, notarized, and filed with the court. 43 years of marriage taught me patience. 30 years in a union factory taught me strategy. And losing Sarah taught me that some things are worth fighting for, no matter the cost. Michael thought he was hunting a confused old man, but I'd just become the predator, and tomorrow the real game would begin. Sometimes the best weapon is letting your enemy think they've already won. 3 days after securing my legal arsenal, I did something that went against every fiber of my being. When Michael called with his smug voice and familiar demands, I didn't fight back. I played defeated. "Dad, we need to talk about what happened the other night. The neighbors are very concerned about you yelling at those nice men who were just trying to help. Those nice men who tried to break into my house with crowbars, but I let it slide." Maybe you're right, Michael," I said, putting a quiver in my voice. "I've been so confused lately." I could practically hear him smile through the phone. "That's good, Dad. That's the first step. Jennifer and I want to come over tomorrow to discuss some options. Real options this time." "Okay, son. Whatever you think is best." The next afternoon, they arrived with reinforcements. Michael, Jennifer, and a thin man in an expensive suit who introduced himself as Gregory Pierce, Family Transition Specialist. Family Transition Specialist, like I was a business being liquidated. They spread their papers across my dining table like conquering generals dividing territory. The same table where Michael had once built Lego castles, now covered with guardianship documents and power of attorney forms. "Dad," Michael began, his voice dripping with false concern, "Greg here has helped hundreds of families navigate these difficult transitions. He's going to explain your options." But Gregory Pierce didn't explain options. He explained inevitabilities. Mr. Miller, your son has documented significant concerns about your capacity to maintain this property safely. The midnight incident with the emergency responders, your confusion about normal maintenance procedures, your inappropriate outbursts with concerned neighbors. I let him talk. Let him paint me as the dangerous, delusional old man they needed me to be. Meanwhile, I memorized every lie, every manipulation, every carefully constructed piece of their legal trap. Jennifer couldn't contain herself. Jackson, you have to understand. We've spent months trying to help you see reason. The market analysis alone cost us $800. The legal consultation fees, the time off work. We're not doing this for us, Dad, Michael interrupted, but his eyes had that cold gleam I'd seen during the quitclaim deed ambush. We're doing this because we love you. Love. The word tasted bitter coming from his mouth. The assisted living facility in Lexington has an immediate opening. It's actually quite fortunate. They normally have a 2-year waiting list. But given your circumstances, they're willing to expedite the process. What about my house? I asked, playing my role perfectly. Michael and Jennifer exchanged that look again. The same calculating glance they'd shared when discussing my grieving process. Well, Dad, the house will need to be sold to cover your care costs. But don't worry, Jennifer's already been in touch with several interested buyers. The market's hot right now. Of course she had. Actually, Jennifer added with barely concealed excitement, I might know someone personally interested in a property like this, someone who'd appreciate all the character this old place has. Character, like Sarah's memories were quaint architectural features. The beauty of this arrangement, Gregory said, shuffling through his papers, is that once the guardianship is established, all these financial decisions become much simpler. No more worrying about taxes, maintenance, market timing. Michael will handle everything. Everything, Michael echoed, and I caught something in his voice I'd never heard before. Pure greed, naked and unashamed. So when do I have to decide? I asked, playing my role perfectly. Actually, Dad, the paperwork is already in motion, Michael said. Gregory filed the preliminary guardianship petition yesterday. The hearing is scheduled for next Friday. Next Friday, 6 days from now. Don't worry, Jennifer added sweetly. It's just a formality. The judge will see that we have your best interests at heart. I nodded slowly, like a man accepting defeat. I suppose you know what's best. But inside, I was smiling, because what they didn't know was that Judge Margaret O'Brien had already reviewed their petition, and tomorrow they were about to get the surprise of their lives.
The guardianship hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m. on Friday, March 24th, in Judge Patricia Sullivan's courtroom. What Michael didn't know was that Judge Margaret O'Brien had made a few phone calls. What he really didn't know was that I'd requested the hearing be open to the public, and I'd invited some very special guests. Michael and Jennifer arrived at 9:45, confident and polished. Gregory Pierce trailing behind with his briefcase full of lies. They found their seats in the nearly empty courtroom, whispering strategies like generals before a battle they'd already won. But at 9:58, something unexpected happened. The courtroom doors opened, and in walked Elena Rodriguez, sharp as a blade in her navy suit. Behind her came Dr. Patricia Walsh, carrying a thick folder that would soon become Michael's worst nightmare. Then Tommy Kowalski, Eleanor Patterson from next door, Mrs. Chen, and half a dozen other neighbors. Michael's face went white. "Dad, who are all these people?" "Witnesses," I said quietly.
to the truth. Judge Sullivan called the court to order. Gregory Pierce stood to present their case, confident and smooth. Your Honor, we're here today because Jackson Miller, age 72, is no longer capable of managing his affairs or living independently. The evidence shows a pattern of confusion, unsafe living conditions, and concerning incidents. Objection, Elena Rodriguez interrupted, standing with the kind of authority that comes from 3 decades of courtroom victories. Your Honor, I represent Mr. Miller, and we'd like to present some evidence of our own. Judge Sullivan raised an eyebrow. This is highly irregular. The respondent isn't listed as having representation. That's because Mr. Miller wanted to see exactly what his son was willing to do when he thought his father was helpless, Elena replied. Your Honor, we have evidence that this entire proceeding is based on fabricated claims and constitutes elder abuse under Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 209A. Gregory Pierce shot to his feet. Your Honor, this is clearly a delay tactic by a confused elderly man. I'm not confused, I said, standing slowly. My voice carried across the courtroom, strong and clear. I've been watching my son systematically destroy my reputation, intimidate my neighbors, and attempt to steal my home through fraud and manipulation. Michael's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Elena approached the bench. Your Honor, Dr. Walsh conducted a comprehensive cognitive evaluation of Mr. Miller 3 days ago. Would you like to hear the results? Dr. Walsh stood, consulting her folder. Your Honor, Jackson Miller scored in the 95th percentile for cognitive function in his age group. His memory, judgment, and decision-making capabilities are not only intact, but superior to most individuals 20 years younger. The color drained from Jennifer's face. Furthermore, Elena continued, we have evidence that the petitioners orchestrated a campaign of harassment designed to create the appearance of incompetence. She nodded to Tommy, who stood up in the gallery. Your Honor, I represent the United Auto Workers Local 286 Retiree Advocacy Program. We've been investigating reports of elder fraud targeting our members. The tactics used against Mr. Miller match a known pattern of inheritance theft. This is ridiculous, Michael stammered, but his voice cracked. Elena pulled out a folder thick with documents. Your Honor, Evidence A. Recorded phone calls from senior living facilities and home care services, all contacted by the petitioners on Mr. Miller's behalf without his knowledge or consent. Jennifer was now staring at the floor. Evidence B. Photographs taken from vehicles parked outside Mr. Miller's home by investigators hired by the petitioners to document alleged incompetence. That's not what happened, Michael burst out. They were there to help. Dad was having an episode. An episode? Elena turned to face him directly. Mr. Miller, would you please tell the court what you were doing at 2:17 a.m. when these men attempted to force entry into your home? I was sleeping in my bed, I said clearly, in the house I've owned for 37 years. When I confronted the intruders, they claimed my son had sent them because of my memory issues. They were recording everything on their phones to create evidence of my alleged incompetence. Judge Sullivan looked stunned. Are you alleging that the petitioner orchestrated a false emergency to create evidence for this proceeding? That's exactly what I'm alleging, Your Honor. The courtroom was dead silent except for Jennifer's sharp intake of breath. She was staring at Michael like she'd never seen him before. Michael, she whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. You told me he called the movers himself during a confused episode. Michael's face went from white to red. Jennifer, don't... She stood up abruptly. I can't do this. I can't be part of this. She looked around the courtroom, at all the faces staring at her, at the evidence of what she'd helped orchestrate. I'm sorry, Jackson. I'm so sorry. And she walked out. Michael watched his fiancée leave, then turned back to face the judge, his lawyer, his father, and a courtroom full of people who now knew exactly what kind of man he really was. Your Honor, Elena said into the silence, we move to dismiss this petition and file a restraining order against the petitioner for elder abuse, harassment, and attempted fraud.
Judge Sullivan didn't hesitate. Granted on all counts. The gavel came down like thunder, and Michael's face crumpled like a house of cards.
6 months later, I was standing in my kitchen making Sarah's apple pie again, the same recipe that had started this whole nightmare. But this time, the smell of cinnamon and brown sugar didn't carry the weight of betrayal. It carried hope. The restraining order had worked exactly as Elena promised. Michael couldn't come within 500 feet of my property. The elder abuse charges were still pending, but Gregory Pierce had already settled out of court. His family transition specialist license suspended, his reputation in shambles. Jennifer? She'd sent me a letter 3 weeks after the hearing. A real letter, handwritten on cream-colored paper, not some legal document. She'd broken off the engagement, moved back to her hometown in Vermont, and taken a job with a nonprofit helping seniors protect themselves from exactly the kind of scheme she'd helped orchestrate. I was blinded by Michael's manipulation. I thought I was helping a concerned son care for his father. I never realized I was helping a son steal from his father. I'm sorry, Jackson. Your Sarah would be proud of how you fought for her memory. That letter made me cry. The first tears I'd shed since Sarah's funeral that weren't born from sadness. The house felt different now. Lighter, like a weight had been lifted from every room. Mrs. Chen stopped looking at me with pity and started bringing me homemade soup again. Eleanor Patterson invited me to her bridge game. Father Rodriguez asked if I'd consider teaching Sunday school. Apparently the story of my legal victory had spread through the parish like wildfire. But the real healing happened on a warm September afternoon when I decided to fix that creaky third step. Sarah had mentioned it 1,000 times over the years. Jackson, honey, we really should fix that step before someone gets hurt. But somehow there was always something more urgent. A leaky faucet, a broken window latch, the usual symphony of homeowner maintenance that never seemed to end. Now, kneeling on that step with my toolbox and a piece of solid oak I'd bought specifically for this job, I understood why I'd put it off for so long. Fixing it meant accepting that Sarah was really gone, that her voice wouldn't remind me about it anymore, that I was truly the sole caretaker of our shared memories now. But as I carefully measured and cut the wood, as I removed the old boards that announced visitors for 37 years, I realized something profound. This wasn't about erasing Sarah's presence. It was about honoring it. Every swing of my hammer was a promise kept. Every nail I drove was a commitment renewed. This house, our house, deserved better than to be a symbol of betrayal and greed. It deserved to be what Sarah always intended. A place where love lived, where memories were treasured, where family meant something sacred. The new step was solid, silent, perfect. Standing back to admire my work, I thought about Michael, not with anger anymore, but with a sadness so deep it almost took my breath away. Somewhere along the way, I'd lost my son. Not to death, which would have been clean and final, but to something worse. To a greed so consuming that it had eaten away everything good about the boy I'd raised. He'd chosen Jennifer over family, money over memories, immediate gratification over lasting legacy. But maybe that was the real lesson in all of this. Legacy isn't something you can steal or inherit or manipulate your way into. It's something you earn, something you build day by day, choice by choice, moment by moment. Sarah's legacy lived in every room of this house not because she owned it, but because she loved it. Because she filled it with laughter and warmth and the kind of daily kindness that transforms mere buildings into homes. My legacy would be in keeping that spirit alive, in protecting not just the physical structure, but the love it represented, in making sure that when my time comes, this house passes to someone who understands its true value, not its market price, but its emotional worth. I'd already rewritten my will. The house would go to the Springfield Community Land Trust, with the stipulation that it be sold to a young family who needed a home, not an investment. The sale price would be deliberately below market rate, ensuring it went to people with love to give, not money to spend. Michael would get nothing from me, but more importantly, he'd get nothing from this house, because this house would continue Sarah's legacy of love long after I was gone. That evening, as I sat in my living room watching the sunset paint the walls golden, I felt something I hadn't experienced since before Sarah's diagnosis. Peace. Complete, absolute peace. The house was quiet except for the normal sounds of an old home settling into evening. No creaky step, no midnight intruders, no threatening phone calls or legal documents. Just the whisper of Sarah's presence in every corner and the satisfaction of a battle fought and won. So that's my story. My son tried to steal my home, my memories, my independence. He thought I was just a confused old man who'd roll over and let him take everything Sarah and I built together. He was wrong. But here's what I want to know from you. Was I right to fight back this hard? To destroy his relationship, his reputation, his future? Some people say I should have forgiven him, found a way to work it out as family. What do you think? Was I justified or did I go too far? Tell me in the comments below, what would you have done? And if this story taught you anything about protecting yourself or the seniors in your life, hit that like button and subscribe. Because unfortunately, stories like mine happen every single day.